So the topic that I've been asked to teach is strength and flexibility for Aikido. And we have 30 minutes to do this, and that's a lot of stuff to cover in a very short time. So quick introduction. Kim already did the introduction, so I don't have to add much to that. I think the first question that we have to ask ourselves, should we even bother with this? Is strength important? Is flexibility important? So that's the first question that I'd like to kind of a little bit address. Next slide, please, Grant. I read a very interesting article by Chiba Sensei, and he said, Aikido is like a tree. Go back one, please. Go back one. Yeah, Aikido is like a tree. The leaves and the branches are the softness and the flowing. But every tree needs a trunk and roots. And the roots and the trunk is the strength and the precision. So my opinion, and it's not very much valuable when it comes to Aikido, is that strength and flexibility is important. It's not critical, and I really want to emphasize that. You can practice Aikido and enjoy Aikido without both of those things. But as you'll see at the end of my presentation, I'm going to pull it all together, and I think it's important. So please think of strength as a continuum, as a chain, and or as a circle. And as you know, a chain is just as strong as its weakest link. So if you look at this picture of O-sensei, this is a man in his 70s or maybe early 80s. I'm not quite sure. It wasn't clear when this picture was taken. But please notice his forearms. Notice his physique. This is something that I think is worthy of emulating, is worthy of aspiring to be that kind of healthy, that kind of strong when you get to that age. Next slide, please. So in general force, we're talking about strength now. We'll spend about 15 minutes on strength and 15 minutes on flexibility and wrap it up. Basically, there's very few ways you can look at strength, and there's pushing, there's pulling, and there's kind of bending and twisting. So we look at our upper body pushing and upper body pulling, lower body pushing and pulling, and twisting and crunching. That's really all there is to it when you think about being strong. Now in Aikido, in general, we don't pull. You know, there are some very few exceptions to that. You know, when we do a Koho Tenkan, there's a little bit of a pulling perhaps. In some of our Kokinage, we have pulling. But in general, most of Aikido involves pushing. So we can focus our attention when we think about strength for Aikido on pushing. Upper body pushing, lower body pushing, and the various types of crunches, which is really, really important. Next slide, please. So if everybody can, I mean, this is not a lecture, this is a workshop, so it's going to be participatory. So you can turn off the slides, focus on me, Grant. We're going to do a 2-minute workout, warm-up just to make sure that we're not stiff from the 20-minute break, and we just move our joints, and then we'll start doing some stuff that I think will be beneficial. So I'll just highlight the caveat here. It's not pushing, pulling, or crunching, and that is that Aikido, we connect with a partner, and typically we connect with a partner using our hands, and therefore the strength of our hands and how we use our hands is very important. In Japanese, in the traditional martial arts, it's called tenouchi, which means literally inside the hand. But the tenouchi is how we connect. Can you highlight myself, Grant, rather than the slides? So while Grant is highlighting my own video, I can see the slides. Can everybody see me? There we go. Thank you. So, tenouchi is how we use the hand. Literally, again, the translation is the inside of the hand. But it's so critical for Aikido. Think about doing our ikkyo, tenouchi, nikkyo, tenouchi, sankyo, tenouchi, yonkyo, tenouchi. So it's very important, and I'm going to put that together with all the other strengths. So let's get up, let's warm up a little bit. I'll adjust my camera so we can see everything together, and then we'll get into it. I hope people have brought bokken, so we can work on our tenouchi. Small joints, please. And the wrists, we're going to do it very, very quick. We don't have much time. And go into your elbows, and go into your shoulders. Let's move into hips. Just a little bit of movement. Change direction. Now, ideally, if people can turn on their cameras once we go into the exercises, go down to your knees. I can actually give people feedback if possible, but again, you don't have to feel compelled to do so if you're not comfortable, or if you're at your desk and you don't have space to work. Let's just warm up the ankles. This is all just standard Aikido warm up, nothing fancy. So let's talk about tenouchi. And I like to get people strong for tenouchi with a bokken, but not the way typically we do that. We're going to have the heel of the hand on the top of the bokken, and the pinky and ring finger from the bottom. And we're going to work in one hand, only one hand. So you want to strengthen your tenouchi for all the Aikido techniques by doing very slow kiri-oroshi, cuts like this. And make sure you stop your bokken completely. Now this is the basic thing. Now I'm doing it seated, and I'm presuming that most people don't have space to swing a bokken in their hand. But ideally, if you can do it in kamae and do this, this is when you will start really getting the benefit for Aikido in the strength development, because you can focus on the ball of your foot, you can focus on your heel of your foot, you can focus on your knee being pulled up, the kneecap, and your glute. So now we have the whole chain going through the body, through the twisting, into the leg, into the ground. So if you have a bokken and if you are able to do so, don't go too high so you hit the ceiling, but just do a few of these kiri-oroshi, which is cuts, straight cuts, and tighten the finger and work on this tenouchi all the way through into the ground. So this is step number one. Now, when we talk about strengthening, the really most important thing is progression. And progression means progressive loading. So as you want to get better, you want to add more and more load. So you go from your basic bokken, you go and use a suburito, which is a heavier bokken. And again, you go very, very slow. And make sure you stop. Dead stop. And as you get stronger, it's easier to do. You don't want to do many. Excuse me. It's much better to go slow and feel that connection right from the heel, through the leg, through the glute, through your core, through your shoulder, into the hand. This is how you're going to strengthen your hand. Okay, once you've mastered your suburito, I suggest something like an oar. Same thing. You do the same thing, one hand. Of course, you do the other hand as well. Again, we don't have time to go through all the exercises in detail, but you work both sides, nice and slow, and ideally standing up. Then, once you get stronger than that, you can do what my old senpai, Frank Polak, used to do. He used to have a piece of steel. That's the basic. So, once we have the hands, that's the first link of the chain. And for Aikido, it's very, very critical. We're going to move from that into the upper body pushing. Grant, is there any way that I can see everybody as like more screens rather than just a few screens at the top? I'll just send that out, and we're going to continue. So, in order to develop the upper body pushing, I would really encourage people not to do what is typically done in the martial arts, which is a whole bunch of push-ups. Because a whole bunch of push-ups really gets you strong in one thing, and that is in push-ups. We're not looking to strengthen the push-ups. We want to strengthen our ability in Aikido, and that's the upper body pushing. So the best way to work that is to get into a plank position. Plank position, and again, if people want to join me in the plank, that would be really good. So we just hold this kind of plank. This is the very, very basic. And the point of the plank is that you want to link all the way from the bottom of your feet, through your glutes, through your core, into your shoulders, and then into the hand. That's step number one. That's the most basic way to develop your ability to push with your upper body. Okay? Now, ideally, you practice a 10-second descending push-up, a 10-second hold, and a 10-second ascending push-up. Do it very, very slow, in such a way that you're able to pay attention to what your body is doing. If you start, please watch, if you do this and you start sagging in your hips, okay, that means you don't have a connection. That means you don't have your whole body connection and you're rushing too much. So you slow it down. Grant, I do not see myself as the featured. Can you help me with that, please? I'm seeing Kim, so I don't know what everybody else is seeing.
We're seeing you.
Okay, awesome. So, again, make sure you don't let your hips sag, because think about that in Aikido. That means you have a very loose link. You have to straighten the body, and very, 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 very slowly. Typically, I would suggest doing a count of 10 to go down. Now, of course, if you don't have the strength to do that, you do this on the knees, but you still keep a straight line from your knees to the shoulder, okay? So, that is how you start developing the upper body pushing. Now, if you think about our Aikido techniques, we almost never use two hands at the same time to push, except for some kokinari or things like that. So really, how we want to develop that is do our plank, but then remove this hand. Completely remove this hand and hold this plank. Again, with focus on your glutes, with focus on your core. Now, we're starting to think about, this is much closer to how we do our Aikido, right? And then, if you think about the kamae that we have in Aikido, most of our power will come from the back leg. So we don't have that much power in the front leg to push. Therefore, we go into our plank, and then we remove this leg. And just try that again at home. If you have the space, hold this position, see what it feels like. Pushing all the way from the ball of the foot, through the glutes, the kneecap is pulled up, through the core. And that's really the kind of feeling that you're going to want to have here. Or when you do your Aikido, from the back leg into your tenouchi, it's the same feeling that you would have in this plank with this up and this leg up. Now, as you practice this and you get better at it, you want to do what's called progressive loading. And again, the way to do progressive loading is you start from here. Before we did this, then we take this hand away and we do this. And then, of course, later we do this, etc., etc. So that's called the progressive loading, and that's how you bring it together and make it stronger and stronger. So that's our upper body pushing, which is really the second link after the tenouchi. The third thing is our lower body pushing. And again, I would suggest that you do this at home. Again, I cannot see anybody except for images, but I'm assuming that people are trying to do this a little bit. Let's do our lower body pushing, which means we're going to do a very simple squat. And we're going to start with the basic. So, maintain your straight back, and we're just going to go down, 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 maintaining a straight back, all the way down into your squat. Okay? Now this position, you should be able to go all the way down into the squat without rounding your back like so. So this is where it ties into our flexibility, which we'll talk about later. But think about pushing into your knees here so you can open up your hips and have this nice, long, straight back. Very nice, Jean, that's good. Now the pushing comes into here. We come straight up. Okay, so we're pushing into the legs, straight up. That's the basic lower body push, right? Sebastian, be careful, you've already rounded your back a little bit. So think about pushing your sternum forward as you go down and have this nice posture. Think about any Aikido technique, you generate the power from the back leg, you have to have a straight back, otherwise you have a weak link. Now how do we progress this? It's very simple. We start by just lifting one leg, right? Just take one leg off the ground, and now you go down. You go down, all the way down, in full control. Then you bring the leg in, so you're in a squat position, and you come up. And then you practice the other side. You bring it off the ground, and all the way down, keeping the heel on the ground, all the way down. You bring the leg in, and you come up. Okay, like I talked before, progressive loading. So now we've put our whole body weight on one support as opposed to two. Once you've mastered that, you release the leg, you go all the way down on one leg, and then you come all the way up on one leg. Now, if you're not ready for that, you take a belt, a simple Aikido belt, you hook it on a door handle or on a friend, and you just go down like that. So a friend will help you. You use your hands to pull yourself up as you strengthen your leg to get better at it. Again, remember, this is where we want the power, from the heel, through the glutes, and this exercise is what's going to strengthen it. So we've done our tenuchi, we've done our upper body push, excuse me, we've done our lower body push. Now we have to think about really the most important part in Aikido is the core, right? Because it's the link between the lower body and the upper body. And we need to think about longitudinal turning. That's along the spine. In Japanese, they call it taijiku. Taijiku is the axis of your body. So one is working along the axis of the body, and the other is the crunching. Right, so let's all do some basic crunching together. And the way I like to do it, rather than doing silly sit-ups, is just putting the hands on the ground. I'm going to just readjust my camera so we can do this. A second. So, just place your hands on the floor between your hips and your knees, pressing into the palm, and lift. Just lift the legs like so. Make sure you're keeping your legs straight. And that's what's going to strengthen, very basic, the core. Okay? Now, this is step number one. How do we do the progressive loading? Progressive loading, we press here, and maybe we lift ourselves off the ground and lift. Lift and lift. So that works instead of just the legs, the hip flexor and the lower ab, it goes all the way into the upper abs. Okay? Now, for the twisting, I like to use this exercise. We basically just lie down with the hands out, crucifix position. You bring your legs straight up, and you bring them down to the fingers. Toes to fingers, toes to fingers. Okay? So, pardon me, I lost my clip here. So that's the basic how you engage the twisting, the crunching, the legs and the arms into creating a very strong chain. Now again, I'll say it again like I said before. Is it required for Aikido? No. But look at the pictures of O-sensei. Look at the instructors that inspired us. Kawahara sensei, Chiba sensei, Kanai sensei, Satomi sensei. Very, very strong people. And they put that into Aikido and they manifested it in different ways. Now, let's talk about, again, we don't have much time. So let's talk about flexibility. Do we need flexibility for Aikido? I don't think so. I don't think it's required. However, almost every class that I've attended with almost every instructor, there was an element of flexibility. So the instructors think that being flexible is important. Grant, for a second, can you bring up the picture of O-sensei stretching? While you do that, I will continue talking. So, O-sensei clearly put some importance, you just go a little bit forward and you'll see. O-sensei clearly put some importance on stretching, and there you go, that's good. And all of our instructors clearly did too. So again, this is a man in his 70s or 80s. He's working on his front bend. He's working on his hip flexibility. I think, in my humble opinion, that's enough, Grant. You can bring it back to me. Thank you. In my humble opinion, the flexibility in Aikido is not so important for the Aikido practitioner, the person executing technique. It's much more important for uke, because flexibility, or the ability to move, or the range of motion that is a result of flexibility, is what prevents you from getting injured. So, I don't know about you, but many times when sensei throws me, my foot gets stuck in his hakama. Well, that's a huge hamstring stretch. If you don't have hamstring flexibility, you're going to tear your hamstring. Think about various techniques. Shihonage requires shoulder flexibility. So there's really only 3 ways that we need to look about our flexibility. One is shoulder mobility, and we're going to do an exercise together. The second is hip mobility, and the third is hamstring flexibility. Now, in the beginning of classes, typically we will do this stretch, right? And we will do this kind of stretch. This is hamstring and adductor flexibility. So these things are very important. But let's do one quick stretch together, because I want you to check yourself. So stand up, please. And people in chairs can do it as well. You don't need to stand up for this one. Let's work on our shoulder flexibility. What I'd like you to try, and please go slow so you can pay attention to what's happening in your body. Bring your arm up so it's right by your ear. Good. Now, right away I see, and your arms should be straight. I see some people allowing their rib cage to come out. So that means you're creating mobility by moving your torso rather than getting the mobility from your shoulder. So this is really exercise number 1 for you to create shoulder flexibility, is make sure your arm comes up without moving your torso all the way around in the back. Work through the entire range. Now, if you're finding that your arm comes up like so, okay, and I know some people have this problem, I'm seeing it on the screen, that means your shoulder is not flexible enough. One way to get better is just lean on a wall and just gently push your chest forward, but while pulling the rib cage in. Okay? So that's the shoulders. The next thing is our hamstrings. So let's do this test together, folks. Feet together, knees are locked. Take a big inhalation and just go down and touch the floor with your palms. Please, everybody do that. Now, this is one of the few, yeah, great, and come up. This is one of the few stretches in which I encourage people to not think about their back. So don't think about keeping a straight back as you bend. You're allowed to let your back round and reach for the floor. This is your hamstrings. Now, if you are having issues with this, let's work on getting our hamstring flexibility better. So I see Emmanuel there. He's reaching for the floor, but he's not quite making it. So please watch me. Here's a very simple drill to help with that. You're going to go into the squat. You're going to glue your hands to the floor. You're going to take a big inhalation. And as you come up, you're just going to go as high as you can without releasing the floor. Keep your palms on the floor. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to straighten one leg at a time, like so. Straighten one leg at a time, every time with an exhalation. So if you can't lock both legs, you're going to straighten one leg at a time, and that'll slowly, slowly increase your range of motion. Now, I'm going to give you one more. I don't want to overwhelm you, and we're almost out of time. We only have 5 more minutes. One more way to increase that flexibility. So please, everybody stand up. Now, if you are flexible and you can reach the floor, no problem. That's great. What I'd like you to do is just bend your arms. If you're not flexible enough and you can't reach the floor, have your arm extended. I'm going to do it this way so you see what I'm doing, so you see the difference. Just lean forward like so, and just go to the end of your comfortable range. Once you're here, what I'd like you to try to do is tighten your butt as much as possible. Just tighten your butt as if your last dollar is between your cheeks. You tighten it as much as possible. Tighten, tighten, tighten. Then you take a big inhalation and hold your breath for 10 seconds. And then exhale. And then you're going to hold this position, this newfound position that you're in. And then again, you're going to tighten your bum as tight as you can. You're going to tighten the bum as strong as you can. Then you're going to take an inhalation, hold for a few seconds, tighten, tighten, tighten. And then when you release, you go down further. So please try that. Hopefully, you will have achieved a little bit more range of motion. Now, of course, it's not instant, but it definitely works. Now, let me tell you this as a more of a teaching point. You actually cannot stretch muscles. Muscles do not stretch. The only way to gain flexibility, there's 2 ways to gain flexibility. One is to teach your brain not to tighten the muscles, and 2 is to tolerate pain better. So that's really is the only way to increase range of motion. But range of motion is very, very important. Let's do one more stretch before we wrap everything up, because I believe I have only 4 minutes. And this is this stretch that everybody likes to do at the beginning of class. So if you can if you have the space, put yourself in this position. It is called the straddle stretch. And I would like you to focus not on the stretching, but focus on your posture. Notice my back. I want to keep a nice long back. I don't want to be stretching like this, because then you're not stretching, you're actually just increasing the space between your vertebrae. So you want to have a nice long back and keep this position. So we do this in almost every instructor's warm-up. I know Osawa Sensei does it in his classes, and Osawa Sensei is quite flexible, so he clearly works on this. Now, we want to lead forward from the sternum. So we want to work on leaning forward while maintaining a straight back as you lean forward from the sternum. So I'd like you all to try that again, and it doesn't really matter. Nana over there, don't round your back. You're rounding your back, and we don't want that. Now, even though it's small videos, I still can see you. You don't want to do that. So you want to keep a nice long posture as if somebody is pulling your head up. But you come down straight like so. Okay, and I'm going to give you, I have 2 more minutes. So I'm going to give you within 1 minute a trick to increase this flexibility, and I'm going to wrap it up in the last minute. Okay, so how do we come forward so that we can come all the way low? Again, please be patient with me. I only have 1 minute for this. I'm going to bring my camera down again a little bit better so you can see, and invite you to try this trick. So please notice my feet here. What you're going to do is point your toes and press the heels. So you're going to alternate this pointing the toes and pressing the heels. And then you're going to coordinate. In Japanese, they call it ki kentai no ichi. You move together. So you press your heels, and then the second you point the toes, you come down. Then you press your heels, and the second you point the toes, you come down. You press your heels, and the second you point the toes, you come down. Then you want to be flat on the floor, all the way flat on the floor. Now again, you won't have time for that today. Pat, over there, you're rounding the back. You don't want to round your back. Don't try that. So everybody, sit like this with me, cross-legged. I have only 1 minute left. So let's put it all together. Why do I think strength and flexibility is important for Aikido? I will answer the question if everybody can sit like this with me. So your legs are crossed, your hands are here, and you come up. And then you come down, you switch the legs, and you come up, and come down. So why did I do this? The research is quite unequivocal about this. If you are able to do this exercise, coming up and coming down without using your hands, you will typically live 10 years longer than people who cannot. Okay? If you live 10 years longer, you have 10 more years to practice Aikido. So, strength and flexibility is very important for Aikido. Now, if you cannot do this, I'm out of time. If you cannot do this, you can practice. You can use a friend, you can use a strap, and once you work on improving this, it's been shown that you increase your longevity. So even if you cannot do it now, if you practice this and eventually progress to doing it, you have chances of living 10 more years than the person who cannot. I'm out of time. Perhaps we can open it up to questions for 1 minute, but I think the next session is coming. So that's the end of my session. Thank you very much for your attention. Again, it was a lot of stuff to cover in 30 minutes, but I've given you some things to think about and some things to try. Hopefully, it'll be beneficial.
Okay, thank you very much, Natan, for this wonderful session. I don't see any questions in the chat box, but I have a few questions for you. How often would you recommend doing these exercises? Like every day or a couple times a week?
Well, it's a good question. The question is, what do you want? If you want to get stronger, I would suggest you do it 2-3 times a week. If you want to get more flexible, same thing. But you don't need to spend a lot of time. 15 minutes for the strength and flexibility 3 times a week is plenty. The point is, though, to do it slow and attentive so you can actually create this mind-body connection, like I said at the beginning with the plank. If you just bang out 50 push-ups and you're not paying attention as to how the energy is flowing through your body, you really won't get the benefit. Definitely not for Aikido. You get good at push-ups, but you won't get better at the power that we need for Aikido. So, 15 minutes 3 times a week for both strength and flexibility is plenty, in my humble opinion. Anything else?
Thank you. There's a question here. Any tips if any low back pain, how to do the core work when seated?
Well, I would say that the best way to work on your lower back issues is work on developing a good squat. So this position is our it's a fundamentally human position. Okay, for millennia we hung out in this position. For millennia we took care of our bodily needs in this position. For millennia, women delivered in this position. It's a very natural, and it's great for your lumbar spine. So if you have lower back problems, right? That's a lower back problem. You work on that. You work on that initially here, and then here, and then here, and then here, because you really want to develop that movement to protect your lumbar spine. Anything else?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and then maybe one last question is, if you do these exercises regularly, like what kind of a difference do you think you'll feel in your Aikido practice? You know, whether you're Nage or Uke.
Well, again, strength and flexibility is not important for Aikido per se, but the quality of how you move is so important for Aikido. So I know Hilary Sensei is going to be teaching a session about where your feet are. It's all about the quality of your movement. If you look at the senior instructors that have inspired us all, like Chiba Sensei and Saotome Sensei and Kanai Sensei, maybe not so much in his movement. Kahar Sensei was very, very economical in his movement. So in the early days, it almost looked like he didn't move. But Kahar Sensei is already up there. You know, he had a whole bunch of internal power that we don't have. So we have to generate our power through movement. And your ability to move in a quality kind of way comes from your strength, your flexibility, and your mobility. So, I mean, I hope that answers a little bit of your question, but that's...
All right. Thank you very much. I don't see any more questions. Yeah, and then there's a lot of people thanking you for the class, Natan, in the chat box. So yeah, we're really happy you were able to do this.